Catalan course, game number 6. I'm playing an 1800 rated player. In this game, we're going to see an isolated queen pawn type position and talk about how to play against that IQP. We get the standard Catalan closed position after c6 was played. This is all following the course right up until queen to b6. This is not a standard book move. Usually you will see pawn to b6 in that position, and black wants to get their bishop out to b7. So here I play rook to d1. I think this is a good choice, so keep that in mind. We always want the rook on d1 because it lines up with the queen, but even with this kind of strange queen to b6 move, rook to d1 can still be useful because in future positions, this d pawn is likely to trade off for e or c. Our rook is still good on d1. Another good choice here, though, is to play pawn to e4 straight away, and I think this might even be a little bit stronger because here we can get these standard trades, knight f6, drop our queen back to e2. I felt in this position the advantage wasn't large enough, but it's actually a really good position still because we have that nice bishop on the long diagonal pointing at b7. And we also have the space advantage, 2 pawns in the center. We have our queen on a nice square, bishop ready to develop, rook coming to d1. Black has to play c5 here to try to fight back, but after bishop to e3, we still have a 1-point stockfish advantage. And it's really because of that c8 bishop being a bad piece and that g2 bishop being a really strong piece long term. So I think e4 right away would have been good, but rook to d1 is also a good move here, even after the queen has moved off the d file. So that's something to keep in mind. When it plays c5, makes a lot of sense. He's trying to make trades in the center. I trade a set of pawns, and here what I'm doing is I'm trying to go against an isolated queen pawn from the black side, make that the weakest pawn on the board. We talk about that a lot in our ChessGoals courses. See if I can work against that weakest point on the board. At this point, there's a crazy looking move. It's actually knight to b1. And I've seen this idea before, but I didn't think about it in the game, or maybe at this time I hadn't seen it yet. But the idea is we know that pawn on d5 is going to sit there for a long time. If black ever captures on d4, we're going to take back with the knight, and we're going to have this square secured. So all we need to do is make sure that this pawn is defended by a second piece besides just the knight. And I can play knight to b1 here. The knight heads to c3, hitting that weakest pawn on the board. So the goal is to pressure d5. Knight to b1 is a great move. If c takes d is played, for example, we take back, defend that knight, and then bring our knight to c3, pressuring d5. We've got 2 pieces attacking it, both knight and bishop. And we're looking at a 1-point stockfish advantage again. So that's a nice, comfortable advantage for white. If I played knight b3, c4 here is very close to equal. My opponent, I think, was kind of set on going for this IQP position, which did favor me a little bit. I mean, he definitely should have played c4 there. So I take, bring my knight to this active square. But I think in this position, a good takeaway for me is bring new pieces in. I should definitely bring that bishop in, and bishop to e3 is a good move. If knight g4 is played, I could move it again, targeting this good bishop, black's good bishop. I moved a piece multiple times, knight f5. Takes, takes. My opponent goes knight c to e4, so he's playing very well. The position's back to equal. Even though I have the bishop pair, look at how active the black pieces are compared to mine. And this pawn is solid for the moment. I don't have any minor pieces that are able to attack it. So I played bishop to e3, and this is actually a mistake. It allows my opponent to capture on b2, and I just kind of underestimated this move. You know, I thought I could put a rook on b1 next, and I would be in good shape. But the problem is if I put a rook on b1, I'm not even sure which one, the e2 pawn drops. So now 2 pawns have been captured, and even if I try to get one back, I guess in this case I can't, but I would still be down a pawn. My opponent plays bishop to c5 though, so instead of queen takes b2, bishop c5, and now I blockade knight d4. A couple more moves are made. I'm trying to improve each piece, so brought that second rook into the game. h6. The queen is slightly low on squares. I found the best move though, and this is kind of a deep idea. If I play queen to f4 here, this queen can actually be a target for black's bishop coming up because he wants to go knight to c4. And if I hit him with this tactic, pawn to b4, which we're about to look at, there's bishop to d6, hitting the queen. So let's look at the version that happens in the game with the queen on h4. Queen h4, now b4. This is a cool idea. Queen or bishop can capture b4. If bishop takes, I'm going rook to b1, pinning that bishop to the queen. And I already have this bishop lined up with the queen. My opponent goes queen takes. Now I play queen to f4, targeting the rook. And after he moves the rook, I missed the correct idea. I should play knight to b3 here. And the idea with knight to b3, if black trades queens, queen takes queen, bishop takes, I'm on the rook and on the bishop at the same time. Black cannot take the bishop because it drops the queen. So the problem for black here is, how does he save the material? There's only one good move to hold equality, and it's rook takes e3. That's not easy to find. So I think that's the route I should have played to try to get back into the game. Instead, I played knight to f3. So I kind of missed one of the main points of my move. But I will still say, like, sacrificing the b pawn, even with this knight f3 move, does make some sense, because I think now I'm getting ready to win the pawn back and equalize in the endgame. So takes, takes. And the problem for black now is he kind of walked into that scenario again. He should not have taken on f4. He should have played either rook e4, or even stronger, rook takes e3. He didn't see it. And I remember this game, the clocks were getting a bit low because this was a tournament with no increment. It was just a 5-second delay. So once you get below 5 minutes, you're really just playing on 5 seconds every move. So I took, and then my opponent got very aggressive here. Bishop takes f2. It's the strongest move, but it's not going to be enough. Rook to d2, shutting down the second rank. And at this point, my opponent resigned. So key takeaways from this game: move number 9, rook to d1. Keep in mind, the rook is still good on d1, even if the queen for black is not on d8. That's an important one. Move 11, knight to b3. This is an IQP idea. When you have this isolated queen pawn, keep this maneuver in mind. Knight to b1, knight back to c3. That's a good one to know. It's very useful. I've seen it multiple times since this game. Move 15 is the next takeaway. I played bishop to e3, which sacrificed this b2 pawn. Not the best idea. I should have played a move like knight to e5 and then trade off this knight, targeting knight to d7. So this is just kind of awkward for black. And this is actually already an equal position with best play. And then the last takeaway is move number 19, queen to h4. Finding this was critical, calculating the tactics. I give this move credit for what got me back into the game. This combo of queen h4 with the b4 idea, that caused my opponent to be more likely to make a blunder, which he ended up doing in the next couple moves. So that's game number 6. We will see you guys for game number 7.